There aren't bells, and it's really disorienting for me as a secondary teacher. I think I'm actually 2 minutes late. We're all tardy. Sorry. All right. So my name is Lisa Avery, and welcome to Instant GSA Workshop. I'm a 7th grade English teacher at Rosemont Middle School in La Crescenta, California, which is part of the Glendale Unified School District. Thank you all for being here. I'm here because with a group of brave students, I helped start my school's GSA in 2015. And I want to help you possibly do the same thing. So here's my lesson plan for this workshop. We're going to spend the first 30-ish minutes, and I'm going to tell you about my experience, how it was that we came to have a GSA, what difference it made, the pitfalls, the successes, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The reason I'm telling you my story is because I don't think my story is unique. I think my story could also be your story, and I'm hoping that by listening to the experiences that I had, that you'll be able to pull something from that will be useful to you. Also, I learn better from examples, so I tend to present lots of examples. So that's sort of the motivation there. So after I tell you my story, we're going to change gears, and then it's going to become more of a workshop model where I will sort of give you some questions for you to start with about creating your own GSA, but then you will have time to talk to the people around you, start to write down your ideas. Maybe you're here with a partner from your school, and you can start to sort of plan some things out. We'll do some sharing out. And then at the end, I'm going to, so it's the now I have a GSA, so now what kind of portion. What are you going to do at your weekly meetings and things like that? So that's my sort of big picture plan for our time together. So I hope that meets with what you're hoping to get out of this session. All right. So one of the reasons that I want to share my story with you is because it takes courage and tenacity to be a GSA leader. Brené Brown said, "Courage is contagious. A critical mass of brave leaders is the foundation of an intentionally courageous culture." And in the last 5 years, I've definitely found that to be true. Thank you. A group of courageous students inspired a group of courageous educators who now continue to inspire courageous students, right? And the cycle continues. So the part of why I'm here today is I want to help you bring that cycle to your school. I want your school to feel that courage as well. All right. So the Rainbow Gems, or how Rosemont Middle School started a GSA. So what was Rosemont like before a GSA? Well, Rosemont is situated in La Crescenta, as I mentioned, which is in the northern edge of the city of Glendale in LA County. Even though we're in LA County, it tends to be a historically, sort of culturally conservative area. We have a large immigrant Korean and Armenian populations, which tend to be quite religious and conservative. We also have a pretty significant, if not large, at least vocal Mormon population. When I got to Rosemont in 2004, homophobic comments and remarks were all over the place. It felt nearly impossible just to stem the tide of casual homophobic comments within the walls of my own classroom, right? Let alone outside and in the hallways and in the school at large. And no one was supporting us. No one was admitting that that was what was going on or providing resources or support. It just was. It was accepted. And certainly no one was teaching LGBTQ issues in their classrooms, right? Even the most progressive teachers understood, like, we don't talk about this here, right? So what changed? Thank you. So in 2004, when I got there, if you had asked me, can your school have a GSA, I would have laughed. In 2010, if you had asked me again, can your school have a GSA, I would have been like, no way. In 2014, the year before we started our GSA, I would have been, no, that's not going to happen here, right? So what changed? In the spring of 2015, the students from our local high school, I don't know if I mentioned this already, so we have a small community within the big city. We've got 7 elementary schools that feed into our 1 middle school, and we all feed into 1 high school. okay? So at that high school, there was a small, quiet GSA, and in 2015, they decided to do a fishbowl discussion activity. If you're not familiar with the fishbowl discussion, it's when a group of people sit in the middle of a room, and they have a discussion, and then there's a group of people that are around them, and all the people on the outside get to do is listen, right? Like watching goldfish in a bowl. So they decided to have a fishbowl discussion in front of the faculty of their school about what it was like to be LGBTQ at that high school. And they found it to be an incredibly powerful experience. So they asked to replicate it at my school, at the middle school, where they had all just been students. Now I want you to think about this. It takes quite a resilient teen to be able to sit in the middle of the school library, literally surrounded by all their former teachers, and talk about the harassment and isolation that they experienced while they were there. We were called out, with kindness, but we were called out, right? And what we found is that what none of us wanted to acknowledge was actually true, right? We were failing our LGBTQ students every single day. And so we were, a whole bunch of us were moved to act. What did that look like? Well, it started with teachers putting up safe space stickers in their classrooms, and I sprinkled some safe space stickers around your tables. If you didn't end up getting one, I do have more. Come see me at the end, okay? So what we realized is that even though a lot of us were quite progressive, very accepting, the students had no reason to believe that, right? They did not assume that we, the adults in their lives, were safe. So we had to tell them. Right? We had to make that explicit. And the safe space stickers started working. So part of my story is my husband, Alex, who at the time of this, in 2015, was the mental health counselor at our school. So he's an LCSW, and he was providing therapy for some of our students there on a daily basis. And there was one student that he had been working with for quite some time, and she had shared with him, you know, friend issues, family issues, past traumas. On the day that he put that rainbow sticker up in his office, she came out to him as bisexual. Don't tell me it doesn't work. None of the teachers had to say anything about the safe space sticker. The kids who needed to see it saw it. The kids who didn't know what it was didn't care. Everyone moved on with their day. But it already, just that one action of putting the sticker up, started to change certain students' comfort level in our classroom. All right, so then a whole bunch of us went to our principal, who I love, by the way. She's a friend. She self-identifies as an ally, but she's going to get bashed a little bit in this presentation, okay? We went to our principal, and individually, there are probably 4 or 5 of us, we want to start a GSA. And she said, no, there's space over here, come on in. And she said no. And the reason she said no wasn't because she was homophobic. It was because she was afraid. She was scared about what would happen. And so she said things like, well, there's a board policy against middle schools having a GSA. Not true, by the way. That would have been illegal. And then she said, well, the community isn't ready for it. Well, I live in that community too, right? If I'm ready for it, there are other people like me too, right? So my husband Alex and I continued to talk about this. We're like, we need to support the LGBT kids. We need to figure out what we're going to do. And we kept coming back to the idea of a GSA. And so by the time summer came around, we had pretty much decided, okay, we're going to spend the summer researching this and figuring out what we need to do in order to make it happen. Now, also during the summer, our administrators, back up. So during the summer, my husband and our principal and the GSA advisor from the local high school got together to talk about what it's like to be an advisor of a GSA. Now, here's where the good stuff starts to happen. As it turns out, our principal was very close friends with this high school advisor. And in front of him, she couldn't say no, right? So that worked to our advantage. Our administrators all went to a gender spectrum conference that summer, and they learned about the struggles of transgender kids and their families and gender nonconforming kids and their families, and they came back and they were moved. I went and I spoke to one of my administrators and said, hey, how was your conference? You know, what'd you learn? And she got tears in her eyes like almost instantly. She's like, the stories of those kids. I was like, that's why we need a GSA. I don't know what to tell you. So by the time school started again in the fall, we were done asking for permission. We went to our administrators and said, by the way, we're starting a GSA. Just so you know, this is what's happening. Okay? So we couldn't ask for permission. We had to just say that that was what was happening. So starting the Rainbow Gems, how did we do it? Well, GSAs are student-led clubs. So the very first thing we needed to do is we needed to find our students. So we had a group of students that we knew identified as LGBTQ or were really strong allies. And we started by having conversations with them individually, so as not to out any of them, right? These are individual conversations. Hey, a group of people are talking about starting a GSA. Is that something you'd be interested in being involved with? All the kids were supportive, even if they didn't want to be the leader, right? And some of the kids even said things like, we can do that? Like, they didn't even know that was a possibility. Once we had about 6 leaders, we started having sort of leadership planning meetings. And I can't remember at this point if it was once a week or it might have been twice a week at that point because we wanted to get things going pretty quickly. So we started having meetings with just the leaders. And what we did in those meetings is first we picked a club name. At first they wanted to be called the Skittles. And we suggested that maybe the tagline of Taste the Rainbow wouldn't be appropriate at the middle school level. And they said, why? And we said, did you want us to explain it to you? And they said, no. So then they picked the Rainbow Gems, and they were riffing off of Steven Universe's Crystal Gems. So they picked the name, the Rainbow Gems. We gave them sample mission statements and ground rules, which we modified a little bit, and mostly they approved. And then we talked about what we were going to do in the club meetings and their concerns, right? How we could mitigate their concerns about having this group. And in the background, every time our principal got scared, we were having private confrontations with her. Because while she meant well, she was scared. So right before we wanted to take our club public, she wanted to pull it out and be like, nope, we can't do it. She totally got cold feet. And my husband had a little conversation with her in the parking lot where he used some really choice 4-letter words and basically said to her, like, these are the kids on campus that are looked down on by everyone else. Are you willing to do that too? And we're not going to tell them. So if you want to make the club stop, you can show up to our next meeting and you can tell them yourself. She didn't want to do that. And so I want to point out that even though my principal, like I said, a friend, I love her, we're still in contact, self-identified an ally, there was a lot of resistance, there was a lot of fear, right? It wasn't hate, it was fear, but that's still resistance. And in order to overcome that resistance and really make her an active ally, we needed to use research, right? We had to provide her with numbers about the effects of the mental health issues of LGBT youth, right? The bullying and the absenteeism that you see in that population. We needed to inform her about the laws, that in fact, no, you don't get to say no to us. We have other student-led organizations, thank you very much. Therefore, we are entitled to start our GSA and you cannot stop us. Peer pressure, right? We had the advisor who was her friend that she didn't want to say no in front of. Pulling on her heartstrings from the Gender Spectrum Conference, right? When seeing those stories, meeting those kids that really are the ones who need it the most. And then we made it personal, right? You have to go tell them. And then when we finally did all of that, that was when we had her on board. She was scared. So when I say courage and tenacity, like this is what I mean, right? You kind of have to be relentless. Yeah?
And I'm an administrator, and there's a lot of very supportive ones.
And there, yes. So because we're recording this, I'm going to repeat what you just said. So she's saying as an administrator, there are lots of supportive administrators too, and that is 100% true. So I'm not telling this as to scare anyone off, but just as the reality of even administrators who are supportive sometimes are afraid. Yes, question?
Was the resistance personal, or was it from the higher ups causing that resistance there, or that fear?
So the question is, I'm going to again repeat the question, was it the resistance within that individual, or was it being trickled down? That's a good question, and I don't know that I know the answer to it. I don't know that I can give you a full answer because I wasn't privy to all of those conversations. All right, so once we finally overcame that resistance, it was time for the Rainbow Gems to come out. So we opened up our club first by having the leaders invite their friends. And then when those friends came, we invited their friends. And then we invited their friends. And you know what helped? We fed them every single time, right? So after several weeks, we started putting announcements in the bulletin. The Rainbow Gems meeting is today at lunch, or it's a GSA, but we didn't say what GSA was. So just like with the safe space stickers, the kids who knew, and the kids who didn't, and that was okay for a few weeks while we were getting our feet underneath us, right? And then finally, it was time for us to really be out as a club, and we started explicitly calling ourselves a gay-straight alliance in the announcements, which, by the way, also took some doing. Our principal didn't want to do it, and I finally stormed into her office, and I said, "You're afraid of saying gay on the announcements." And she picked up her pencil, and she put it back in, right? So what did it look like in our first year? We had a really successful Ally Week. We partnered Ally Week with this, and we did it at the same time as our local high school. We like to do it during their homecoming week because there are a lot of other activities, and so it gets even more publicity. So we had a really successful Ally Week, and Ally Week at our school basically looks like this. We ask you to sign the Ally Pledge, and I sprinkled some examples of those around your table, which essentially says, I'm not going to be a jerk to my LGBTQ classmates. We use our PBIS acronym. Ours is ROCKS, so we use that as part of the Ally Pledge. So you sign the Ally Pledge, and you get a free rainbow wristband. Our first year, we gave out 700 wristbands. We had only ordered 500. We thought that would last us years. So we had to do its emergency order, rush shipping and all of that to get the wristbands there in time to get them to all the kids. We were blown away. 60% of our student population signed the Ally Pledge in the very first year. Blown away. In January, we participated in No Name Calling Week, which was a smaller event that we did with, we had a Random Acts of Kindness Club at the time, but it got our name out, right? It continued to help us be an active club that students were aware of. And then in April, students participated in the GLSEN Day of Silence. We had a lot of meetings about, what students' rights are with the Day of Silence, what they could do, what they couldn't do, what they should expect. Then, of course, on the day of the event, 20 kids who had never been to a meeting decided they wanted to participate, which was perceived by some teachers as those kids kind of just trying to get out of participating in class. So we changed how we did things in the future to make sure that there was much clearer communication. And while all this was going on, we had 25 to 50 kids showing up to our weekly meetings. So every Tuesday at lunch, we met with our leadership to plan for the meetings. Every Wednesday at lunch, we had our general meeting where all of those kids would come.
Can you say that again?
Tuesdays, we meet with leaders. Wednesdays, we meet with the general club. So I give up 2 lunches a week for this club. 50 students is a lot of people to have in your room and to know what to do with. So it wasn't easy. First of all, our leaders were unreliable. Remember, we had poached them from the counseling office, right? They were not the most emotionally stable students on campus. Actually, they were the least emotionally stable students on campus, right? We were really excited when they just showed up, which meant that Alex and I were doing all the planning for this GSA. We had never hosted a club like this before. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to expect. And so we struggled to come up with weekly activities for our club, which is part of what I'm going to give to you at the end. You're welcome. All right. So after we put our own children to bed, we would go into the kitchen, we would get out the tub of ice cream, and we'd sit there over the tub of ice cream, and we'd say, all right, what are we going to do tomorrow, right? It was like being a first-year teacher again in that way, right? We spent $600 on our club before we wrote our first Guide to Rosa grant. So if you are starting a GSA, I highly, highly, highly recommend you attend one of the sessions today about the Guide to Rosa grant, or at least pick up a flyer. So the $600, most of it was food, because we were feeding them a lot at the beginning. Now I feed them once every 3 weeks or something like that. But in the beginning, to get the momentum going, right, snacks. Plus the wristbands. And that $600 does include the rush shipping that we had to pay when we didn't have enough wristbands. But that was way more money than I had budgeted for this. I was willing to put some money in, but that was a lot more than I had anticipated. And we had the support of most of our staff members, but certainly we had others that were not so happy. When Alex did a presentation to the staff about transgender students, we had a few staff members walk out. We had a teacher who was vocally critical of our club decide that he was going to come to the club one week and watch. And at which point we informed him, well, everyone is welcome here. You don't get to watch. They aren't monkeys in the zoo. If you're here, you are expected to participate. And then we turn to our students and say, hey, everybody, we have a special guest here. Make sure you include him in your conversations. He left and he didn't come back, right? But we had to sort of perform that role of bouncer to protect the kids. And we didn't want all of that hard work to just fizzle out. Quick question.
And just piggybacking on what you were just talking about, and maybe you'll touch on this, did you experience anything from the community, and backlash from the community?
So the question is, did we experience anything from the community? And I may get to it later, but I'm going to answer. I can answer it for you right now. The short answer is there was some. I didn't experience it personally. So that was fielded by my principal. And then because my husband was in the counseling office and he was available to take those phone calls, he would sometimes take them also. I asked my principal about this in preparation for this presentation. And what she said is that she didn't give a specific number, but she had a number of meetings with community members. Some of them were parents of our students, and then a lot of them weren't. And but they were mostly educational. She had to inform them about the laws, that we were protected and we are allowed to do this, and that it is about student safety, right? And if your focus is student safety, we have this club to make all students safe. Who's going to argue with that? It's a lot harder, right? So to keep our club going, we now recruit our leaders in the spring. So I don't wait until school starts in the fall. I start looking at my club members in the spring and trying to handpick who I want my leaders to be, right? So I start recruiting my leaders in the spring. I start inviting them to the leadership meetings and tell them this is a student-led club, which means you get to make it what you want it to be. If you don't like the activities we're doing, or if you don't like the way this club feels, we can change it. That's up to you. We wrote CTA Guide to GSA grants our first 2 years. So we, after that first fall, we wrote our first Guide to GSA grant. We received $1,000 to help keep our club going. That paid for food, paid for wristbands, paid for supplies. The second year we wrote for it again. We received it again. Food, wristbands, supplies, helped us get going. And then after that, we were able to have enough momentum to do our own fundraising. Right, so now I don't need it. We sell our T-shirts, right? We sell swag bags, which have a little button, thank you, a little button in it, and then a fun-size thing of Skittles. I can sell a fun-size bag of Skittles for $1, okay? We do candygrams in the spring, right? And again, most of our expenditure is food, because that's what it's lunchtime, that's what they want, but we also use it for books, for resources, supplies, markers, whatever else it is that the club needs. So we were able to get our own, that's what I just said, get our own fundraising going. And then all along the way, we were really careful to express gratitude to our allies and helpers. So in our first year, we made a thank you note template. And we had our club members write thank you notes to the teachers that they knew had a safe space sticker up. Right? Because it's important to validate that and to make sure that the teachers know that what they're doing is important, right? And we continue to do this now. I write thank you notes for the silliest things when it comes to this club. Like, hey, you showed up and tabled at Ally Week. You get a thank you note, right? Everyone gets a thank you note. Because then they're willing to come back, and they're willing to do more, and they're willing to support me when I need support. So I can't overemphasize food, thank you notes. If you do those two things, you're going to be golden. All right. So what happened? Well, 4 years later, this was a picture of staff wearing rainbow shirts on our Rainbow Spirit Day. This is not our whole staff, and this isn't even all the staff that was wearing rainbows on the Rainbow Spirit Day. But as you can see, that's already a big difference from where we started. Included in that picture are my principal and one of my assistant principals. Most classrooms display a safe space sticker. Not all, but most. There are far fewer homophobic comments in the classrooms and the hallways. Far, far fewer. And in fact, in my room, when I hear someone saying, oh, someone's gay, and my ears pop up. What? And I go and I listen. Like, oh, we're talking about the new Percy Jackson character that's gay. Oh, have that conversation. That's exciting. You talk about that, right? Our events are annual events like any other events on school. We've got Red Ribbon Week, we've got Ally Week, we've got Spirit Week. It's all the same. It's not stigmatized in any way. And our GSA is visibly supported by the ASB. So the ASB students come and they help with Ally Week. They table during Ally Week. They do this Rainbow Spirit Day at the end of the week. It's supported by the PTA. The PTA now buys our wristbands for us. Our administrators are supportive. As I mentioned, 2 of them are in this picture right here. They wear their shirts and they send us to these conferences and things like that, right? And even our superintendent is supportive. So this past year, I had 2 club members who, as part of their Girl Scout Silver Award project, they wanted to create an LGBT section in the school library. So I helped them write a Guy DeRosa grant. They received $300. They made their LGBT section. They publicized it. And our superintendent tweeted about it, right? Like that's the kind of support that we now experience at my school, which 5 years ago I would have thought would have been impossible. So what I'm trying to show you, right, through all of this is that GSAs change schools. This isn't unique to me. It's not unique to Rosemont. This happens across the nation, across the world. According to GLSEN's 2017 National School Climate Survey, students who have a GSA at their school hear fewer negative comments based on sexuality or gender, are less likely to feel unsafe because of their sexuality, and are less likely to miss school due to feeling unsafe, and have more supportive teachers and a greater sense of belonging in their school. And you know what the magical thing about this is? This is true for every single student at the school, whether or not they go to your GSA. They don't even have to go. And you can change your school culture like that. But I would actually take it a step further, because in my experience, the Rainbow Gems hasn't just changed my school, it's changed the community. So here's what I mean. So as I mentioned, we have 7 elementary schools that feed into our middle school. 2 of them now have GSAs of their own. A 3rd one is in discussion. And every spring, my co-advisor and I, we go and we visit those GSAs. We meet the 6th graders who will be coming to our school as 7th graders, right? Hi, I'm your safe place to land. Come find me, right? And they do. They email me over the summer. They find me on the very first day of school. When does the Rainbow Gem start, right? Hold on. I need to find my textbook first, right? So that's changing culture, right? Ally Week continues to be a community-wide event. At the high school, most of the football players wear rainbow stickers on their helmet for their homecoming game. The cheerleaders wear rainbow ribbons with their uniforms, right? It's community-wide. This past year, we networked with local art galleries, and we had a coming out themed art show that was included artwork from elementary school students, middle school students, high school students, and adults in the community in a public art gallery. It was amazing. I'm an English teacher. I have to quote To Kill a Mockingbird, otherwise I risk losing my credentials. So, Atticus Finch said, "Watch carefully the magic that occurs when you give a person just enough comfort to be themselves." That is what GSAs do. I see it every single year. This last year, I had a girl come to me at the beginning of the year, a 7th grader. She was quiet. She walked in without saying much. She went to the corner of my classroom, she sat down on the floor, and she curled up into a little ball. This is a 12-year-old. Curled up into a little ball. Would not talk to anyone. Kids came by, hey, how are you? Are you okay? She's shaking them all off. So finally I go and I'm like, can I sit with you? She's like, yeah. So I sat down with her. I just sat with her for a little while. I was like, hey, what's going on? And then the tears start. My mom and dad won't accept me, and they don't believe me that I'm gay, and they're not going to, right? Okay. I'm so sorry. I hope you can come back next week. She came back again and again and again. And now she is the loudest, most vocal, most at-home student in my classroom. I really wish she wasn't quite so comfortable, but there you have it, right? That's what GSAs do. They give kids a place to be themselves. So we're going to change the energy in the room a little bit. So we're going to shift from about me to more about you, okay? So in order to do that, we're going to have a snowball fight. Maybe some of you have done this before. You need a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper that you don't need. I put some notepads out in the middle of the room. There are more. You just need a single sheet of paper. All right, so the idea of the snowball fight is it's a way to get people to answer a question anonymously. So on your paper, don't write your name, but write your answer to this question, right? So I've told you my story. I've told you why I'm here. Why are you here? Why did you come to this session? Why did you come to this conference? Or what do you hope to accomplish? Just 1 or 2 sentences. Write down why you're here. All right. Once you have your answer down, you're going to crumple your answer up into a ball. You need to make it into a snowball. And what we're going to do is we're going to randomize our answers by throwing them around the room, quite literally. So try and keep it away from the corners. Try not to hit anyone in the eye. But we're going to have a little snowball fight, throwing it around. We'll give you about 30 seconds. Feel free to get up out of your seat, get some blood flow, and go. If one lands near you, pick it up and throw it again. All right. Find a snowball near you and open it up. Sometimes they end up under the table, so you might need to look under the table. So sorry.
Anybody need one? This one extra. She needs one. Oh, there's no way.
Woo! All right. Does anyone have an answer to this question now that's not yours that you would like to share? Why are you all here? Yeah.
I wanted to learn about how I can help support my SPED students who are LGBTQ+, who are curious about gender issues.
Okay, wanting to support SPED LGBTQ students who are curious about gender issues. All right, what else? Yes.
I want some ideas on how to fundraise for my GSA and how to prevent the fizzle of the club.
Okay, so we're looking for fundraising ideas, how to prevent the fizzle. Absolutely. What else? Yes.
I'm here to learn more about how to approach LGBTQ issues in my classroom and to interact with others like me.
Okay, so looking at LGBTQ issues in the classroom, interacting with others. Let's do one or two more, yeah.
Together new activities for my school's GSA club that I advise.
Okay, new activities for your club. We will get to that for sure.
My school does not have a GSA, but we have many students who would benefit.
Okay, looking to start a GSA? Yes.
I need to start, I have a GSA block.
I've got a GSA block. I had a GSA block too. We're going to talk about that in a second. All right, so hopefully you got something out of my story. Maybe it's just that you could identify with where we were and where we were trying to go. Maybe I had a problem that you had similarly. I don't know. But hopefully we were able to pull something from your story. So the next section I wanted to talk about is, I want a GSA. How do I make it happen? So there are handouts. Yeah, I would love help passing those out. One of you guys could help pass those out. And these handouts are available in the CTA Go app as well, I believe, I've been told.
Thank you.
So I have plenty. All right. So quick orientation to the handout in front of you. The first 2 pages are my quick start guide, right? The questions that you should think about as you're getting started. The second 2 pages are resources. So sample mission statements from elementary, middle, and high school, sample ground rules, and then 2 pages of meeting ideas and resources, and then on the very end, some guides and articles and research for you. Okay, and all of the links are live on the digital version of this, but I made bit.ly links so that you had a chance to be able to find them later, okay? All right, you're welcome. So, how are you going to make this GSA happen? Oh, let me back up one quick second. All right, remember that if you work at a public secondary school, thank you, and you have other student extracurricular clubs, a GSA form cannot be blocked. You have the Federal Equal Access Act behind you, as well as additional protections in the state of California that protect the formations of GSAs at the secondary level if there are other extracurricular clubs.
Can you repeat that law?
Federal Equal Access Act. Act. Federal Equal Access Act. So if you work at a secondary school with other student extracurricular clubs and you are being told you cannot have a GSA, you should gently remind the people who are saying no about the Federal Equal Access Act, and possibly contact your union and or the ACLU. Yes?
Does that work even if it's not a problem anymore. They started giving me my funding back, but they were saying that the LCAP only provided funds for clubs that dealt with art and STEM.
I get $0 from my school. I do not get a stipend. This is a labor of love. I do not get any money from my school at all. So
this is just to have it in existence.
As in existence.
And this only has to do with secondary.
And that is only secondary. So elementary is a gray area. Again, we have 2 elementary GSAs in our district, but you may need to do a little bit more of a song and dance. Yes? Okay, yes.
So we're a K-8 district.
You are a K-8 district.
So, and we are an elementary district.
Hmm.
But I mean, like, that's in the name of our district. How
Right.
does that-
So you're at a K-8 district and are called an elementary district. I am not a lawyer, so I cannot answer that question for you, but that is a fascinating thing to think about.
We're a K-8 district as well, and we always fall under elementary.
Okay.
That
So
sort of thing.
this particular law may or may not pertain to you. And again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to go out any further on this limb than I already am. But that just because you don't have that legal protection doesn't mean that you can't find a way to make it happen. And we'll get to that in a second. Okay.
What if your school doesn't have extracurricular
If your school has 0 extracurricular clubs, you are not protected. So that's one of the ways that people who try to shut us down is by saying, okay, we're going to have no clubs.
So no Spanish club, no nothing? Science?
We'll come back to that. All right. Let's come back to that. Let's come back to that. Okay. So if you are looking to become a GSA advisor, you should know what GSA advisors do. So in my experience, being a GSA advisor means that you need to be an advocate. You are going to need to advocate for the LGBTQ students and sometimes staff at your school when they're not being treated equitably. Okay? Being a GSA advisor means teaching. There are going to be lots of people that have misunderstandings or misinformation about LGBTQ issues who will end up coming to you, or you will feel compelled to tell them why they are wrong, right? That includes students as well, okay? Also, your teaching skills as an advisor come into play as you help your students plan their meetings and things like that as well. You will find you need to counsel students. Like in my example with a girl who sat in my classroom crying, right? That was not an isolated incident. I have a fundamentally different relationship to my students now that I run a GSA than I did 5 years ago, right? Some of them call me mom, right? That's just how it is now. And you will be a mentor, especially to your student leaders who need to learn about how to present themselves in front of a group, what's acceptable when you're, right, that there is a different expectation of them as leaders than there are of the general club population, right? Mentoring what that looks like and helping them to plan meeting ideas. So getting started guides. There are a handful of getting started guides available online. When I got started, though, I didn't find them as helpful as I wanted them to be. First of all, most GSA guides are aimed at high school, and as a middle school teacher, I found that incredibly frustrating. 5 years ago, GLSEN had a quick start guide online, and I kid you not, that was 200 pages long. It's not there anymore. Hopefully they're revamping it because that was a monster. But here are some of the Getting Started guides that are available. They're good resources. I'm not trying to scare you away from any of them. I just don't know that you necessarily have to read all of them before you really get started. So the ACLU's How to Start a Gay-Straight Alliance is good. The GSA Network's GSA Advisor Handbook. Teaching Tolerance has a longer document called Best Practices for Serving LGBTQ Students, which I also recommend. And you have links to all of these in the handout, whether digitally or you want to type in the bit.ly. The one thing I would add to that, so these are all aimed for high school. The one thing I would add to that, which isn't in your handout, is Welcoming Schools has resources for gender and LGBTQ inclusive schools. And Welcoming Schools is an elementary-oriented organization, mostly doing trainings and classroom lessons for like a general, like that any teacher could use in their classroom. So if you're an elementary person or a middle school person, you might want to just jot down Welcoming Schools. And that is funded by the Human Rights Campaign, HRC, so you can just Google Welcoming Schools HRC and it'll pop right up.
Is it HRC?
HRC for Human Rights Campaign. But none of these things really fit what I needed when I was starting a GSA, which is why I'm here. So one of the things that I want to address is, aren't they too young? No. The answer is no, otherwise I wouldn't be here. By age 4, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, most children have a stable sense of their gender identity. 4. According to the National, I think it's the Pew Research Center. Yeah, Pew Research Center, yes. According to the Pew Research Center, 12 is now the average age of identification of sexual orientation, and it keeps getting lower as LGBTQ inclusion and acceptance increases, right? So if we can accept that by middle school, students are hormonal, which we do, right? That they're thinking about boyfriend, girlfriend stuff, why can't we also accept that they're thinking about girlfriend stuff and boyfriend stuff, right? They need a safe place to land. I would argue even more than high school students now, the younger kids, because they're exploring these ideas younger than most of us were, right? And so they deserve a safe place, and they deserve adults they can trust as they explore those identities. But advising a baby GSA is going to be different from advising a high school GSA. They are going to need, as you can imagine, and my middle school and elementary school teachers in the room know, those younger students need a lot more hand-holding in order to be leaders and to have these kinds of organizations. So you would need to be a lot more hands-on with the planning of the club. I know some high school advisors are basically like they unlock their door and like the club just goes. That's 100% not my experience. Okay? But I don't want to scare you away from it because it is so rewarding. It's so incredibly rewarding. You're meeting the needs, the developmental needs of your club members. You're providing them social acceptance and support. And as we discussed earlier, changing the culture of your school. That's good work, right? All right, so your GSA plan. So I'm going to highlight a couple of questions that are in that handout that I think are really important to think about as you get started. First of all, why do you want to start a GSA? There is no legal requirement that you have an answer to this question, but you're going to be asked it 57 times, so you might as well have an answer. Okay? GSAs are student-led clubs, so who are your students? How are you going to find them? Who in your staff or in your community could be your allies, and what specifically do you want them to do? Do you want them to email your principal? Do you want them to bring you cookies? Do you want them to meet you for a beer after work while you figure this all out? Like, what is it that you need? Do you want them to host the club when you have a sub? What are your school or district policies about club formation? And that varies from site to site and district to district, so you're going to need to figure that part out with a little legwork on your own. You don't want your GSA to fall through because you didn't file the right paper. Right? That's not a good reason. And then what barriers to your success can you anticipate now? And by that I mean policies, people, culture, right? What can you anticipate is going to be a struggle? And come up with a plan for what you're going to do, because then when that happens, it doesn't shut you down, right? Make a plan now, be proactive. When this person who I know stinks comes to me and gets in my face, this is what I'm going to do or what I'm going to say. GSAs are about student safety, right? Do you want to jeopardize the safety of our students? Yeah.
Have you done any parent outreach just for like information and?
We did not. We sort of let this bubble up very grassroots. What I will say happens now is that on open house night, I have parents who come to my class that are not the parents of my students. They're the parents of my club members, and they want to give me hugs and tell me how happy they are. And I say to them immediately, thank you so much. I'm happy to do it. Would you please put that in writing and send it to my principal? Okay. Thank you so much. Can you please email my superintendent? Here is their email address.
Okay.
Right?
The students don't feel the need to educate parents.
I mean, what they talk about at home is their business.
Okay.
Some are totally closeted at home. Others are not.
Okay.
It's a big variety. Yes?
That response that you had about GSAs are about student safety.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say that again?
The purpose of GSAs are student safety, right? So people who undermine your GSA are jeopardizing your goal of student safety for all students, right? Because if you remember the GLSEN facts that I talked about earlier, that's for everyone. It's not just the queer kids that are getting homophobic comments made at them, right? You make everyone safer when that's unacceptable at your school. Yes?
So so let's say there was a club like the year before,
Uh-huh.
but there's no more clubs that previous year, or the current year. Does that still mean that you could create one, or would you need to create your own club of like, let's say knitting, so that maybe then you could say.
See, very creative. I don't know. You would have to kind of feel that out on your site. So the question was, if there are currently no clubs, but there were clubs last year, do you need to create like a Trojan horse club in order to then get your GSA going? I like that creative answer. I don't know, though. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of that, and maybe the administrators might be able to answer, or if anyone on campus has to fundraise or needs to do fundraising, they have to create a club through ASB.
Yes.
So even if you have like a 6th grade club, or it's not called a club, but
They have to have an ASB account. So any group that has fundraising has to have an ASB account.
So I would ask to see if there's anyone on the ASB accounts and then that is considered a club.
Okay, so, and I'm going to repeat again because we are being recorded. So what he's saying is that anyone who has an account through ASB could technically be considered a club, even if they're not called a club and necessarily meet at lunch. So that would be a good avenue to research as well. A couple more questions I want to highlight for you in terms of safety. What is your job status? If you are not a permanent employee, I'm not going to recommend that you become a GSA advisor. Because even in my own experience in LA County with an ally of a principal, as you heard in my story, there were times where we had to push back and had to challenge our administrators. And I wouldn't want any of you to be in a position where you felt like you needed to do that, but you were worried about your job. Okay? How out can your club be? So if being out as a GSA is not an option for you, there are still ways you can meet the needs of your LGBTQ students. You can have a diversity club or a kindness club, right? And still meet the needs of those students. The caveat I would put there is I don't think you're going to see the change in school culture in the way that you do when you have a club that is sort of out and proud. But for some sites, that might not be safe, and you need to take that into consideration. You want to pick a meeting location where students feel safe. So my co-advisor and I had a blunder this last year. She's a PE teacher, and we wanted to have a dance party in the gym during lunch. And it was awesome. It was going to be great. But the kids had to walk through a horde of kids waiting to play basketball in order to get into the gym. And, 90% of the kids were lovely to them, and that 1 or 2 that were jerks, it was a problem. So we had to rethink, okay, well, we still want to have a dance party in the gym. Okay, but we're going to have them go around this way, so they don't have to walk through that horde of students. So what is a safe location for your club meeting? Or even a place where kids could go in there and sort of be discreet. Like no one's going to look at them funny if they just enter that room. It's super important not to out your club members. It's unethical and illegal to out your students. But I would actually extend that by saying you might want to be careful whether or not you reveal someone attends your club at all, right? Because especially in the first years, I had a lot of teachers come up to me and they would say, does Sarah come to your club? Well, what are they really asking? Right? So just be careful with that, and especially with parents as well. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. Talk to the people at your table, write down your ideas, jot down questions. I'll pop around and let's see. What time are we supposed to be done? All right, so I'm going to give you guys about 15-ish minutes, then we'll share out, and we'll go from there. Go.
Okay. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's quick. So on our high school campus, we have academic clubs, and then we have other clubs.
Okay.
So
Nice. Thank you. All right, does anyone have any ideas that they're really excited about that they want to share out, or questions that they want to share at this point? And I'm supposed to be passing this mic around, and I'm doing a terrible job. No, because it's for the recording. So we actually won't hear it louder. It's for the recording. Okay, go for it.
So I'm going to steal, I'm sorry, what was her name? Paul's idea. I've had my students make posters to hang in the hallways, which will get ripped up. But Paul had a great idea to have teachers hang the posters up in their classrooms. So more protection for those, and it really shows a big ally for our LGBT students. So I really like that, Paul. Thank you.
Another idea is to put another poster underneath the original poster. So they rip up the first one, and then there's another one underneath.
They're double that.
Just saying. Or laminate it, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then on that poster note, maybe have them laminated, and it's harder to rip up.
Yeah.
Good job, Sue.
One easy activity for the clubs we did were friendship bracelets, which are really cheap to get the thread online or at Walmart or whatever. And then the students could make bracelets in their pride flag colors. And so that was popular in the club, or if we were at the quad at lunch at a table, we can invite people up, say, hey, make a friendship bracelet, and there's an opportunity for them to talk. So that was cheap.
Cool. Let's do one more.
This is not my idea. This is C. Scott Miller's idea about giving the students a map of the school and where do you feel uncomfortable. And it tends to be the restrooms. It tends to be, ironically, some teachers' rooms, etc. And the comment came out that we tend to put supervision in the places they don't feel uncomfortable. We leave the bathrooms unsupervised where they're getting harassed.
Interesting point. All right. So to the last section of my presentation is I have a GSA, so now what? So I mentioned earlier that coming up with meeting ideas was the hardest part for us in the first year. And so I'm hoping to save you the time and calories that I put into trying to plan meetings over pints of ice cream. So meeting ideas, again, food. So I like to go to Smart & Final or Costco, and I buy as many shelf-stable Rainbow snacks as I can. So I go like in one fell swoop, and then I put them in my closet. So then I'm not going to the grocery store every week for these snacks, right? I can just pull them out whenever I need. Now, in the beginning, when the club first got started, we were feeding them every single week. But then as we got our feet underneath us and kids started to come and we got our momentum going, we didn't feel like we needed to do that anymore. So now I probably throw snacks at them every 3 weeks, once a month. And I do it just random enough that they'll keep coming for the hope of snacks, right? So in terms of meeting ideas, there are sort of 4 main categories that I divided these up into. So meetings to support, meetings that are social, meetings that are educational, and meetings for advocacy. So here are some examples of the kinds of things you can do for support meetings. So that was a really big deal for us, especially when we were first getting started. The children love watching coming out videos. They love their coming out videos. Screen them first. But they do love their coming out videos, and I've included, in the resources section of the handout, I've given you a whole bunch of links to things, including the YouTube videos I've used in my club meetings. So those, you know, you've got a pretty good success rate, like they're mostly okay, so you should check those out. We've had a lot of discussion groups. We talked about what does it mean to be an ally, things to consider before coming out, how to deal with haters, things like that. We've had guest speakers. We had some guest speakers come from a local LGBT Asian American support group. Again, we have a large immigrant Korean population at our school, and so that really spoke to that group. I'm working with getting the local Galas, which is the Armenian LGBT group in our area, come and speak at our group, because again, we have a very large Armenian population where I live. Social meetings. The kids are really there to find their people, right? So they want to socialize. Here's a picture from a recent club meeting. We were playing Kahoot. You can see my club leaders in the front leading the game. So for social meetings, we've done all sorts of icebreakers and mixers, lines and blobs, and all of those things. Party games like Pictionary, charades, heads up, Kahoot, as you see in the picture. We have had a lot of talk about an LGBTQ book club. Now, I don't know if they're just trying to pander to me as their English teacher, but we haven't quite gotten it off the ground. We have had people present about their favorite books that they've read, though, that have LGBTQ themes in it, and that's been fun. We do dance parties in the gym, because my co-advisor is a PE teacher. And then at the end of each semester, we throw a party. I supply the pizza. The kids bring everything else. They sign up in advance, so it's sort of a potluck-ish style event, and they get excited about that. Educational meetings. This year, my kids really love learning about LGBTQ history and celebrities. They've been really enjoying that a lot. They like to learn about the people that might have been rainbow gems, right? They like to hear about that. Every year, they love learning about the Kinsey scale. And we actually use that snowball activity with the Kinsey scale. So we teach them about what the Kinsey scale is, and then, okay, so what's your number? Okay, you write down your snowball, we'll throw them around the room, and then we tally up how many of every number we get. And the comment every year is, I didn't know there were so many straight people here, right? Transgender issues are always hot topics, using the genderbread person or unicorn or whatever works for you. Other videos to help address the issues, explaining exactly what it means to be transgender and what all that entails. Again, guest speakers can be good educational resources. And then finally, advocacy. So these big events like Ally Week, they don't just like come together overnight. There's a lot of work that goes into them, having the kids make posters, hang posters, role play talking to people about what it means to be an ally, or role play talking to people, asking them to sign the Ally Pledge, planning the Day of Silence and educating the kids about what that means and what the expectations of them are for that action. And then sometimes we've done things like petitions. We've had petitions for gender-neutral bathrooms going around our club before. So those are some examples of the kinds of advocacy things that we've done in our club. Now, obviously, you would want to have a mix of these, right? You wouldn't want to do all one thing. The kids will get bored and they'll stop coming. So keep it interesting, and you keep their interest, and they keep coming back for more. You want to recruit your leaders early, because holy mackerel, bad leaders are really difficult here. So, try to identify who it is that you would be willing to have lunch with once a week to talk about leaders stuff, right? Who would you be in my case, right? I meet with my leaders on Tuesday, and we have our club meeting on Wednesday. So the leaders I'm picking are kids that I'm saying, I'm going to have lunch with you once a week for a year, right? So think carefully about that. Come on through. Think about funding. If your club needs funding, it may not. But if you need or want funding, how are you going to make that happen? Again, I highly recommend checking out the Guy DeRosa grant. They're going to be doing a presentation about that. I don't know if it's later this afternoon or tomorrow. But definitely check that out. And there are flyers in the exhibitor area about that as well. Recruit your allies. Invite your staff members to come to your meeting. Make sure you're reaching out to people. Again, when people come to you and say, I'm so glad you have this club, you can say, that's great, thanks for telling me. Now, could you go tell this other person who really needs to hear it, right? Because I was going to keep doing it whether you liked it or not, right? Publicity, consider reaching out to local press when you're having big events. Could you have the local newspaper cover Ally Week or the Day of Silence? Could your kids write letters to the editor about wanting to start a GSA and their struggles, or about the success of their GSA? This is all great ways to keep going. And I cannot stress thank you notes enough. Go to Amazon, get yourself a cheap box of rainbow thank you notes, and anytime anyone looks at you and smiles, you write them a thank you note and you say, thank you for supporting our GSA. It means so much to us and the kids. You're promoting school safety, right? And when you do that, you are increasing your network of people that are going to support your club in the future, right? I even write thank you notes to the kids who show up at Ally Week, because they're more likely to show up again next time if I thank them, right? We all like to be appreciated. So in closing, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Faith is taking the first step even when you can't see the whole staircase." I had no idea that this is where I was going to be 5 years ago. I would have said, no way, right? But one step leads to another, leads to another, and leads to another, and now here I am, right? I encourage you to start your own journey. Take your next step, your first step, your third step, your 20th step, whatever it is, and keep going. Please consider me a resource. Do keep in touch. I want to hear about your GSA. You can email me with questions. You have my email on the handouts. Use the handouts. There's the PowerPoint is in the CTA Go app. Come sit with me at lunch, whatever. Consider me a resource, and thank you so much for being here today.